The afternoon sky over Pleiku Air Base was a heavy canvas of gray, smudged with clouds that refused to break. The air felt like it was holding its breath. Captain Raymond Blake walked across the tarmac alone, the rhythmic thump of his boots echoing faintly between the hangars. He wasn't the type to boast, but everyone on base knew his name. With over 200 flight hours in the F-4 Phantom, he had a reputation for calm under fire and a strange kind of serenity in the face of chaos. Some called him lucky. Others said he had a death wish, but Blake simply saw himself as a man doing his job, flying through hell so others wouldn't have to. That day, March 12, 1969, he was assigned a low-altitude reconnaissance mission along the Ho Chi Minh Trail, a winding ghost path deep in enemy territory. His wingman's bird had suffered a last-minute engine fault, and the protocol was to delay until a pair could fly. But Blake wouldn't wait. "I'll be back before dinner," he told the crew chief with a quiet smirk, and with that, he climbed into his Phantom and sealed the canopy shut. Engines roared to life, and within minutes, the silver-blue jet was slicing through the haze and rising into the jungle mist. Tower confirmed his position, one last time as he crossed into the Annamite range. Then, nothing. No radio contact, no transponder, just silence. Back on the tarmac, men stared at the sky, waiting for the faintest sound of an engine returning. But none came. Somewhere in the distance, the jungle had swallowed him whole, and with it, 1,000 questions that would remain unanswered. Part 2, Into the Fog. The last transmission came at 14:46. Blake's voice, steady, calm routine, crackled through the radio as he passed over Kontum, confirming his altitude and route. Then, absolute silence. No mayday, no emergency beacon, just a sudden vanishing act into the thick jungle, mists that blanketed the Laotian border. Within 20 minutes, control tower operators were calling his designation repeatedly, their voices rising from concern to urgency to quiet desperation. By nightfall, SAR protocols were launched. Helicopters were dispatched, their blades chopping through the humid twilight, while F-4s and A-1 Sky Raiders swept the jungle valleys below, dropping flares in hopes of spotting wreckage or life. But the jungle offered no answers. It absorbed sound, buried evidence, and withheld its secrets like a graveyard with no names. The search extended into the night, and then the next day, and then again, hours turning into a numb procession of flight logs, fuel reports, and unanswered radio calls. The men on base began to whisper. Some said maybe he'd been shot down and was hiding, waiting for rescue. Others wondered if he'd been captured, dragged, away into the forest, by shadowy shapes in black pajamas. And then there were those who simply said nothing at all, because admitting he might be gone was admitting that it could happen to any of them. In his quarters, Blake's bunk remained untouched. A tin cup still held the last half sip of his morning coffee. A photo sat on his footlocker. Anna, his wife, smiling softly with a baby boy perched on her hip. His name was Michael. No one had the heart to move the picture. The silence that filled that room wasn't just the absence of sound. It was the weight of the unknown, the ache of a man who had vanished not just from radar, but from the lives of those who waited for him. And the jungle, vast and unmapped, remained quiet, like it was keeping him. Part 3. Rumors in the jungle. Days bled into weeks, and hope, once loud and urgent, began to whisper. The official reports became colder, more clinical. Missing in action, presumed downed. But among the silence, strange echoes began to emerge. In a remote village north of Banfanop, a Montagnard elder claimed to have seen a plane fall from the sky, like fire being pulled back to the earth. Others whispered of a man in green, bloodied but alive, being led through the jungle by soldiers, who didn't wear the uniforms of the North Vietnamese army, but moved quieter like shadows. Intelligence units attached to MACVSOG intercepted fragmented chatter, mentions of a captured American pilot being moved east, kept in a makeshift jungle compound near the Annamite foothills. The accounts were never confirmed, always dismissed as second-hand rumors or mistaken identity. But to the men who had flown with Blake, the reports felt too vivid to ignore. He was tall, they said, lighter hair than most, a limp in his walk, and always those steel blue eyes that saw everything but gave nothing away. One recon team swore they found torn flight suit fabric snagged on a bamboo stalk, faded but unmistakably American. Another found boot prints, too large for the local guerrillas, too fresh to be old. Yet every trail led to nothing. The jungle had a way of closing over its secrets, of pretending nothing had ever happened. At Pleiku, the rumor mill churned with equal parts hope and grief. Some clung to the belief that Blake was alive, surviving somehow, waiting. Others steeled themselves for what they believed was inevitable. But for all their certainty, there was no proof, only whispers. And in war, whispers were dangerous. They gave men false hope, but they also kept their brothers alive, in their minds, in their prayers, and in the silence that echoed in every engine. Roar that came home with one less voice on the radio. Part 4. The Letter He Left Behind. 2 weeks after the jungle fell silent around the name Raymond Blake, his commanding officer unlocked his footlocker and discovered a sealed envelope, yellowed at the edges, marked simply, "To be opened if I don't return." The room was still, save for the whisper of ceiling fans overhead, and no one spoke as the envelope was slid open. Inside was a handwritten letter, neat and steady, as if Blake had penned it with the same control. He used to fly through flak-filled skies. The words inside carried no panic, no regret, only quiet resignation and fierce love. "If you're reading this," it began, "then I didn't make it back." He spoke of Anna, his wife, how he missed the sound of her laughter in the kitchen, the way she tapped his shoulder when he was too quiet. He wrote of their son, Michael, just 6 years old, with a gap-toothed smile and a toy airplane that never left his hand. "Tell him I flew for him," Blake wrote. Not for medals or country lines, but so maybe he'd grow up in a world where boys didn't have to grow up learning the weight of war. He confessed his fears, not of death, but of being forgotten, of fading into some lost coordinate on a map, just another call sign swallowed by jungle vines. But still, he wrote with peace. "If they ever find the plane," he added, "leave it there. Let the jungle keep it. Let it be a monument to choices made in silence." When the letter reached Anna weeks later, delivered in a plain envelope with government stamps, she read it alone in the living room, as Michael napped on the couch beside her. She didn't cry at first. She just folded it carefully, placed it in a small wooden box with Blake's name carved on top, and whispered to no one, "He always knew." That letter became more than ink. And paper, it became the only bridge between a man lost in war and the family waiting for a knock that would never come. It was the voice of a father, a husband, a pilot who had vanished but refused to be erased. Part 5, the echo of his wings. Years drifted by like distant contrails in the sky, fading, then forgotten. Captain Raymond Blake's name was etched in cold granite on the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. Line 60W, Panel 5, just another lost soul among thousands. But for those who knew him, the war never truly ended. In 1992, over 2 decades after his disappearance, a retired Green Beret named Curtis Hanley gave a quiet interview for a veteran's oral history project. His voice trembled as he spoke of a covert op deep inside. Laos in 1971, a mission scrubbed from every official record. He claimed that in a remote jungle outpost, as his team was exfiltrating under heavy fire, they spotted a group of prisoners being moved under guard. Among them, a tall, gaunt American with piercing blue eyes and a limp, who didn't say a word, but turned and stared at them with a look that froze Hanley in place. He didn't need to speak, Hanley said. That stare said it all. He was still alive, but already gone. The story was dismissed, buried under red tape and classified files. The Pentagon called it a case of mistaken identity, but for Anna Blake, and for her now-grown son Michael, who wore a uniform just like his father's and flew, in his memory, it wasn't mistaken at all. Every year on March 12th, Michael visits the wall in Washington, his fingers tracing the grooves of a name he barely remembers but never forgot. He sometimes brings his own son now, telling him stories of a man who flew into war not to take lives, but to protect them. Some say if you listen closely in the thick jungles of Laos, where maps still refuse to show the scars of old battles, you might hear the faint roar of a phantom jet engine overhead, even when the sky is clear. Others swear they've felt a breeze where there was no wind, or heard a voice in the trees that didn't come from any man nearby. Maybe it's just myth. Or maybe, just maybe, Captain Raymond Blake never truly left. Maybe part of him still flies, watching, guarding, echoing through the canopy he vanished into. A whisper in the leaves, a shadow in the sky. A father, a pilot, a promise that still hasn't faded. Subscribe for more Wings of Valor.